Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into a really powerful idea in cancer research. What if we could cut off a cancer's fuel supply? We're going to explore the science behind how certain cancers are fueled by hormones and take a look at some of the emerging research that's trying to do just that.
So that's the big question, right? Can we actually shut down a cancer's fuel line? It's a huge idea. But before we can even begin to answer that, we've got to understand, what is the fuel in the first place?
Okay, so what are we talking about when we say fuel? Well, you might be surprised to hear that in a lot of cases, it's something our own bodies make every single day. Let's break down the basic way a totally normal hormone can end up feeding a cancer. Think about it like a campfire. To keep it going, you gotta throw logs on it, right? Well, for some cancers, especially certain breast, prostate, and endometrial cancers, the logs on the fire are actually the body's own hormones, things like estrogen and testosterone. These cancers have gotten really clever, and they figured out how to hijack these natural signals to fuel their own growth. And how it works is actually pretty simple when you break it down. So, step 1, a hormone is just cruising through the body and finds a cancer cell. Step 2, it latches onto a special spot on that cell, called a receptor. It's like a key fitting perfectly into a lock. And once that key turns in the lock, bam, that's step 3. A signal gets sent, and it's basically like flipping a switch that tells the cell, okay, time to grow and divide. Now, don't get me wrong, standard cancer treatments have some really powerful drugs that are designed to block this exact process. But that's not where the story ends. There's this whole new frontier of research popping up that's getting a ton of attention, and it looks way beyond just the standard stuff. And this right here, this is the heart of it. A lot of patients are asking these questions, Hey, what else is out there? What about drugs that are used for totally different things, or maybe even supplements? Could they have an effect on this? And that is exactly what we're going to dig into.
So this curiosity has really sent researchers down a couple of interesting roads. The first one we'll look at involves what are called off-label drugs. And that just means a drug that's officially approved for one thing is being looked at for something completely different, usually because it has some kind of interesting biological side effect. And when you look at the early research, it's pretty wild. You've got tamoxifen, which is already a big name as an estrogen blocker in breast cancer, but it's being explored in other ways. Then you have something like spironolactone. It's usually a diuretic, a water pill for blood pressure, but it also messes with testosterone, which is why it's on the radar. And get this, ketoconazole, an antifungal, just happens to have this side effect where it can slow down the body's ability to make steroid hormones. Okay, so that's the off-label drug side of things. Now let's switch gears and talk about the other path, natural compounds and supplements. What's the early buzz from the lab studies on their potential role here?
And here, we're often talking about things you can find right in your food. Take flaxseed lignans, for example. These are plant compounds that are super interesting because, depending on the situation, they can either act a little bit like estrogen or block it. Then there's diindolylmethane, DIM for short. That's the stuff you get from veggies like broccoli, and it seems to affect how our bodies process estrogen. And then you have chrysin, a flavonoid that's being looked at to see if it can block an enzyme called aromatase, which is basically an estrogen-making machine in the body. Okay, so you've got these off-label drugs over here and natural supplements over there, all of it with some really intriguing, but let's be real, very early data. So that brings up a huge new problem. How is anyone, a patient, their family, even their doctor, supposed to sort through all this? Because honestly, it's like being dropped into the middle of a maze blindfolded. We have to remember most of this is preclinical research. That means it's happening in a lab, in petri dishes, or in animals. It's not proven in big human studies yet. So if you're a patient just trying to figure out what might even apply to you, wow, it can be unbelievably confusing. So to try and bring some order to that chaos, new tools are starting to emerge. One example is something called the OncoIntegrate Protocol Builder. And its whole job is basically to act like a librarian for all this information, to categorize that flood of data and put the research on drugs and supplements into some kind of context. So how does something like this actually work? What does it do for you? Well, instead of just giving you a giant random list of stuff, it actually groups things by how they work in the body. It can flag compounds that are popping up in the early data. But the most important part, it helps connect all that general research to your specific situation, like your tumor's own hormone profile. The whole point is to turn that confusing maze into a clear map so you can have a much smarter, more productive conversation with your doctor. And that's really the big takeaway here. This new frontier in medicine isn't just about finding new drugs or supplements. It's about finding new ways to manage all this information. Which leaves us with a really important question for the future of healthcare. As all this research just keeps growing and growing, what's the best way for patients and their doctors to navigate this evolving world together? It's a huge challenge for sure, and one where having clear information and working as a team is going to be absolutely essential.